Sometimes I go out, I go hard, take what's mine, I'm a star, 'cause I slay.
Hi, welcome to the first episode of Car Talks. I'm Lidia, and today I'm here with Reatea.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So, for our first episode, we're going to be talking about a couple different topics. But first, I just wanted to introduce ourselves. So I'm Lidia. I just recently walked at graduation in May, taking my last class this August, and I'll officially be graduated. And kind of why I wanted to do this podcast is to talk about, our identities and finding ourselves since we're entering a new phase of our lives. Reatea, you want to tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, I just graduated from CU Boulder with I-5, which is integrative physiology. I think we're in this phase where it's like this awkward, okay, now I'm done with my bachelor's degree, now what? But yeah, so anyway, I think it's just this hard part of our life, and we're just kind of in a rush to find out what we want to do, but also shouldn't be because there's not really any rush, right? Does this stress you out?
It really, really stresses me out, and I know it shouldn't. I've talked to people who are already like into their careers that they really, want to stick with for their lives. And a lot of them said that they didn't get there, right away, like straight away after college, or when just as soon as they were looking for a career, they always like built their way up, or just, found a career that they really didn't expect initially.
Yeah, like their majors are like almost opposite from where they end up.
Exactly.
Which is just so crazy to me.
Yeah, and like sometimes, it's encouraging in that I can see myself ending up somewhere that I completely don't expect, but as long as it's something I love. But it's also discouraging a little bit because I wonder if I wasted the last 5 years of my life.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Because undergrad, I think because we just finished it so like recently, it's hard to really think about. I can almost still feel the stress of finals even though it's been months. I think, and just knowing that and understanding that we've done that for how many years and thinking like, dang, I spent 5 years completing my bachelor's and to even think there's a possibility of never using it is it's like it is disheartening, but also I think we can look at it like you said in a light of it's for better,
Yeah.
like we might not always know exactly what we want, and even if it's something different than we thought we wanted, as long as we're happy at the end.
That's so true. And it's just interesting that it's an ongoing process, and I feel like I tend to get so stuck in the now, and I don't think about like all the time that I have ahead of me to figure it out. I think I'm so eager to just I guess find something that I'm passionate about, start being able to provide for myself and not really be dependent on, my family anymore. But I wanted to ask you kind of about like how your identity plays a role in what your passions are, or where you see yourself in the future. And I mean like you have different identities. So whether it's a chosen identity, and that might be something like just your passion, like something you want to do, something you're very interested in, whether it's like a hobby or just career-wise, or something that you were just born with and given, like your race or your gender. Like how does that play a role in where you see yourself going?
Yeah, I think attending CU Boulder, I was definitely a minority being African American, and then given also that I'm more specifically Ethiopian Eritrean, just gave me this whole new identity of being first generation American. And so it was interesting to find a place in Boulder because I didn't necessarily completely identify as black in America because my history was different, and the household I was raised in was a completely different language that I was raised in, and our culture was just so rich and thick that I feel like that's all I almost knew, that I didn't even really understand the American aspect of it all. So I think it was just like this very self-reflective time, and in this time I think it just turned into this whole self-love adventure, I think. I don't know how else to say it, but so not only was I accepting what I was given, and because I just always been so used to it, I never really had to think about it until I was in a space and area where I felt like I didn't belong, and that's where I was like, wow, like why don't I belong? Like what are my identities? Why do I feel like this? Why do I have these beliefs? And then I feel like I became more confident in who I was in that time versus like Where when I was in Aurora, it's a lot of people who also identify as Ethiopian here. There's a big community of us out here, and I think that just made me so comfortable in it that I wasn't always questioning why I was a certain way or why I saw and understood myself in a certain way. But once I became one of the minorities in class, and when race and ethnicity was discussed in classes, and seeing people's heads turn and look at me, expecting me to speak up for my race or whatever it may be, and then on top of that being female, I think it's just these two identities that have always been so heavily pressed in our history, and even currently, and so finding how to navigate through that, and yeah, just I don't know.
So how do you think that your experiences and how you've come to know yourself, and who you've come to know yourself to be, how do you think that that will, I guess, influence your path in your future?
Yeah, I think I'm a lot more driven and confident, like I was kind of saying. I think if I had stayed and commuted at home and went to a local school with maybe similar demographics, I wouldn't have been as challenged. I'm not saying challenge is always a good thing, because obviously there were many instances that I would have preferred not dealing with, but I think it was just that self-awareness that I am thankful for. And it might have just been that I was taking a lot of sociology classes that were questioning a lot of these things, and brought it to my awareness. So that makes me more confident in where I want to go and what kind of influence I want to have on people. And that also made me realize how many young African American women are in this country who don't have like the support and don't have the resources to a lot of things that I didn't even know were out there, and these opportunities that I weren't even aware of. So I think, yeah, it makes me a lot more passionate about helping others and giving them the things that I've been given.
So my question now is, now you know what you generally want to do, and I know we just kind of are stepping into the real life, the real world, as everybody calls it. How do you feel that, like, you know you want to help people, but you're not exactly sure what career you want? So how do you feel that your identity can affect other areas of your life? Like, you know you want to help people, you don't know exactly what career that might be, but what about in family or relationships or any other type of, I guess, facet of your life?
So, okay, so just so I understand what you're saying, so you're asking how what I've come to understand of myself can be a factor in how I interact with people in other aspects of my life, like more of an immediate relationship with people. So, like my family and stuff, I think it's gotten to the point of where I almost even bring up discussions that might be controversial on purpose, just to see if they are hardcore in their beliefs because that's what they really believe, or if it's because they've been told to believe certain things. And I think it's also made me empower them, because I know my mom, for example, like came to the States as a refugee, and I think their mindset of always just being kind and helpful to others might lead them to being taken advantage of. And I want her to be confident up in speaking up for herself in a lot of these ways and finding these resources and opportunities for herself, even because I think she's always just been so focused on what her kids can get and what her kids will become, and not so much of what she can do and what she can become for herself even. And I think I've just become this whole supportive, like, I'm grown now, and I think it's just I feel I want, not even I feel like I have to, but I want to be able to be there for her, and I want to be able to support her in a lot of ways and make her feel like she's also empowered, and have her even understand the kind of impact she's put onto me and my siblings. And so
That's amazing. I definitely relate to that a lot.
yeah.
I feel like a lot of being independent for the last 5 years, mostly independent, that's allowed me to kind of get to know myself, understand who I am as an individual rather than just a member of my family. And I feel like I've learned a lot of things in the past 5 years that I've brought with me and that have stuck with me, like you said. Like having your, like standing up for yourself. I think my mom is a lot like that too. She is so kind and she assumes like the best in everyone, but it easily allows her to be taken advantage of. And I feel like there's a lot of other factors, like there's a language barrier. There's so much, so people make assumptions of her. They assume that I don't know, especially in her workplace, a lot of people expect that she won't really notice if they take advantage of her. And I think it's just because of the language barrier. But really, she does notice, and she is affected by it, but she's just a kind woman, so she just kind of wants to help people, and she just becomes taken advantage of. But coming back, I see these things happening, and I see, like, people, like, putting on extra work onto her, like, in the workplace and everything, and I speak to her and I tell her to just stick up for herself. I tell her exactly like the layers of like the microaggressions and everything that's playing a role into the way people are treating her, and she doesn't see it. She doesn't have like the
that lens or whatever
yeah,
you
she
may
doesn't
call
have
it.
that view of honestly, to just be blunt about it, there's racism, there's like sexism, there's so many things going on in the workplace that she just was never had the chance to be educated about. So when I do take it upon myself as well to speak to her about these things. Sorry. I do take it upon myself to speak to her about these things, but she, it's not like, I don't feel like it's a duty or like a job. I don't see it as a task. It's just kind of like open conversation that just happens in our household. But moving on, I just wanted to know, like, aside from, I guess, who you've come to know yourself as and how you incorporate, your newfound education, I guess, into your personal life and relationships, how do you see that like impacting? I guess you have a lot of room to grow still. I feel like the way we're talking kind of makes it sound like we already know who we are, but that's not true. So who do you see yourself growing to be?
I don't know. I think that's why we're in this awkward phase, or I feel like I am, where it's like we said, like these past 5 years have taught me so much. Like if somebody were to ask me my freshman year at CU, what do you think you're gonna learn? Who do you think you're gonna become? I honestly would have never guessed that I am and who that I am who I am today. So I think it's hard to say even the next 5 years, what that will lead to and who I will become in that time, and what things I will learn and reflect on and become more aware of. And yeah, I think it's just, yeah, I don't know. That's like a question. I don't know.
Yeah, I think for myself, in my future, I really want to. I guess the things I want to learn more about myself. There are areas I want to grow in. I want to be a more patient person. I want to be more reliable. Um, Especially, as I grow, I feel like I'll be building more relationships, if not just stronger relationships with the people, I already have connections to. But overall, I'm with you in that I don't really know how my identity might change, or I don't know exactly what things I'll experience to teach me different things. But I also am curious, what are the things that you're probably afraid of, when it comes to your experiences and how your identity or your future career or future relationships, that's gonna change, and like, what are some things that scare you about that?
Um, knowing myself, have always been, I've always hated wasting my time.
Mhm.
And I think that to this day that's just been consistent, and I know it probably will stay to be consistent. And I know for a lot of people, they can probably all relate that they
Mhm.
don't enjoy. Nobody wants their time to be wasted, but I find it hard to really see, because when I've talked to peers and other people about it, and I've heard great things like, well, maybe don't look at it as time being wasted, right? Because we're still learning, which is very true. Like, I am still very learning. And a lot of the things I'm currently doing or have done in the past, I've learned a lot. But, um, yeah, I don't know. I think I'm impatient in the way of wanting to be in the field that I know I will succeed in and be happy in. And I think just thinking about the paths people have to take to get to that place, it just worries me. Like, I just don't want to waste time in general. So I don't want, distractions to come along, or I don't want, like,
Okay.
I don't know. It can be various, like,
Mhm.
many factors, right? So I think it just aligns with, I just want to go a certain path, and sometimes when that doesn't happen, that
Mhm.
stresses me out. Like, this phase right now currently is very stressful to me because I think it's so much of unknowns going on, and I don't like the unknowns.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
that really stresses me out. And so, I'm learning to be okay with it. I'm learning to just
Mhm.
go with it. I think it's
Mhm.
just like we said, it's just this weird phase in our life because, in middle school you knew you were going to high school. In high school I knew I was going to college, and then now I'm like, okay, I'm done with college. Now I need to get more specific,
Mhm.
than just getting a bachelor's in something I want. I need to know exactly what I want to do,
Mhm.
um, and in this time, it's like, well, what do I need to be doing to know what I want to do, and
Mhm.
getting these answers and resources. And I feel like I am getting pointed to the same resources, but to be honest, those things aren't always as helpful
Mhm.
as we may think it would be, and so
Mhm.
I think that's where I have to find myself being okay with just waiting and just
Mhm.
seeing where um, what path is right for me. I think that,
Okay.
yeah.
So that kind of makes me think about why I don't want to say just our generation. I think maybe a lot of people were like this, people who
Mhm.
have already experienced this. But why are we so afraid of wasting our time? Why are we so afraid of um why are we so impatient? What's wrong with just waiting during the next couple of years just to figure
Yeah.
out what we need, where we're going to be?
Yeah. I think when you said that, the first thing that came to my head was um, growing up with technology. I think it's
Mhm.
just become such a thing to be like, I want this and I want it right now, like, um, in the most convenient and fastest way. And that's what, we've continued being, um, people have been marketing to us for years and years in many different aspects of our lives, versus
Mhm.
like whether it was shopping but not wanting to leave the house and getting, next day delivery, and just having these options out there. And if you're willing to like pay for that extra shipping and handling, or if you're just willing to take, or just whatever it may be,
Mhm.
there just seems to be options of what's the fastest and easiest way you can get something.
Mhm.
And so I think technology has made that possible for us in many ways, and
Mhm.
we've gotten so used to that. And I find myself always looking for the most convenient thing, but that doesn't always apply to long-term things,
Mhm.
like our career aspirations and personal goals that we want to get,
Mhm.
or whatever it may be. I think it's not that easy, and that's what we're
Yeah.
having to learn right now.
Yeah. I think you're so right, and because of that, we're so used to not having to wait for anything,
Mhm.
um, that we don't want to wait for these, I guess, rites of passage even in
Mhm.
our lives. I don't even want to be stuck in a long job search. I
Mhm.
hear so many of my older friends saying that they were looking for jobs and they applied to 70 plus jobs.
Mhm.
That to me that's insane.
Yeah.
I feel like they must have, not really had a sense of direction, or something
Mhm.
must have been wrong there. But I think that maybe I'm wrong in thinking that that wasn't normal, because
Mhm.
I'm just so used to not having to wait for anything.
Mhm.
And I also wondered, does technology also play a role into how connected or disconnected we are to
Mhm.
reality or to other people?
Oh yeah, and I think even social media does that in a lot of ways. I think we kind of find security in things that may not be the best ways to find security. Like,
Mm.
I think we start looking for acceptance and approval just from people that you don't even know, Like, you start having all these followers or friends on Facebook and Instagram and whatever social media platform it may be, but once you start finding this, like your like anxiety goes up when you post things, and if it's not getting as many likes, then all of a sudden you feel down, or you kind of start, you feel depressed almost, and then when it's exceeding your expectations, and all these people you don't even like you see maybe once a year, haven't seen ever, all of a sudden are commenting all these great things, and favoriting everything that you're posting, and all of a sudden you like have this sense of security, but like we're looking for them in the wrong areas, because those things are just so, they're just so limited, like that's just one area of your life, and for you to find your entirety, just your security in yourself, and just social media and what you're posting, that's not who you are. Like that could be an outlet, which is great. Like I am a I think social media is great, but I think it can be harmful in many ways too, especially if we're doing it for the wrong reasons. And I think people find themselves comparing themselves a lot with others, and then they get they get sucked into this deep hole, and they are, like I said, feeling depressed and stuff, because they're not getting the same things that somebody's posting all about, or and then they don't understand, like, that person might be showing one aspect of their life, like yeah, they got a new car, yeah, they got a new job, yeah, they got a new puppy, whatever it may be, right? But nobody really knows what's really going on behind those pictures.
Life.
Yeah, like there's just so much to somebody's life that social media makes it seem like you really know somebody through their photos and posts, but really you don't. You don't know what's really going on behind the scenes. And so, yeah, I think that can be very dangerous. But I think that's one example of social media.
Okay, so do you think that social media allows us to be more vulnerable or less vulnerable? Because from what you're explaining, it does allow us to expose the parts of our life we want to expose, and hide what we don't want people to see or know about us. I think I was very hesitant, particularly Instagram. I was very hesitant to join that because I think people are so glamorized on Instagram, and I was so afraid of kind of feeding myself these images of people's lives that are not really a reality. But I also think that social media has also allowed me to be more vulnerable, in that it's an outlet to express myself in a way that I normally wouldn't be comfortable in person. But I also wonder, am I like that? I guess, is it harder for me to be vulnerable in person because I rely on social media?
Yeah, exactly.
What do you think?
I think that's a really good point, because, like, when people say people get braver behind the screen, because they're not dealing with face-to-face reactions or critiques or whatever it may be, and it just makes you more confident, I guess you could say. And, well, not, I mean, yeah, of course, like what you said earlier too was a valid point too, of like, maybe it is an outlet for a lot of people, and I think that's why I really like social media too, because it's a way for people to express themselves in ways that they might not be able to do in person, or whatever it may be, or just highlighting, they are excited about their new car and they just want to post that. It's not like they're hiding anything else all the time. I'm not saying that's always the case, but when it does come to specifically being vulnerable on social media versus in person, I think it is harder to be more vulnerable in person than it is to be in social media, because you have a lot more control on what you're posting, and you can edit things all the time, and you can form it to be taken a certain way, versus in person. I think it comes out a lot more natural, and you're almost opening the doors for whoever you're speaking with, whether it be friends or family, to make comments to you immediately, and then those reactions and back and forth conversation at that point are just very natural, and I don't think it's you're not asking, like, I mean, you and I do this all the time, right? So, like, sometimes they're like, hey, can you read this response? I don't want it to come off a certain way, versus, like, in person, how you want to approach something, what you're communicating. Even, so I think just facing somebody face to face can be a lot more difficult. And I think that's why people who break up with each other via texting, phone calls, social media, is done as a cop-out. Like, I think they're
Mhm.
doing that because it's a much easier way to do something like that than it is to
Absolutely.
do it and face it in real life
Yeah.
to the person and face to face, you know? So, yeah.
Okay. So, my question to you then is, in your personal life, where, I guess, in what spaces is it easier and harder for you to be vulnerable?
Um, I think it's almost always harder for me to be vulnerable in spaces that I feel like I am the minority in. So I think um, whether it be about politics or you know, women rights or just what any topic, and I think to be completely open and feeling like you can talk freely without being without being interrupted or like attacked. I think fear in that plays a part. So I think it's just a fear of um, the response that you're gonna get.
Mhm.
And so,
Yeah.
um, and especially for somebody who's not typically the most outspoken person,
Mhm.
when they're put into situations like that, I think it's a lot harder for them to feel um, ready to talk
Yeah.
about certain things and becoming vulnerable, and especially in front of strangers. Like, obviously, I'm going to be a lot more vulnerable with my closest friends and
Mhm.
family and openly talk about things versus, um, having certain conversations or discussions in a classroom about race interaction experiences that I've had and stuff
Mhm.
like that. So I think it just depends on, yeah, who you're
Mhm.
surrounded by and if you would typically feel comfortable around them or not. And that's just for me personally.
Yeah.
It's different for each person, but
Yeah.
yeah. What about you?
So I think I am a lot more vulnerable, obviously, like you said, with my closest friends, closest family members. Not every family member,
Right.
but it also really depends on what I'm being vulnerable about.
Mhm.
When it comes to talking about relationships, I'm most comfortable talking to you.
Mhm.
We're very close. We've had a lot of like history together to
Mhm.
where over time we've just developed a really close relationship to where we can feel comfortable talking about, our um, so yeah, I can be the most vulnerable with you when I talk about relationships, even, family, uh, anytime something comes up, something serious, I'm most comfortable talking to you about it. But I think it's extremely difficult for me to be vulnerable with, I feel like I get afraid that people will have some sort of feel power over me or like leverage, feel like they have leverage.
Mhm.
So I think, for example, especially when it comes to relationships,
Mhm.
um, I kind of wait until someone else is open with me before I'm open with them.
Mhm.
And it also depends who. But when it comes to like romantic relationships, when I met the person I'm dating, he
Mhm.
was very open and honest about a lot of things, and
Mhm.
that allowed me to be very like open and honest back.
Mhm.
I feel like I reciprocate a lot, and that's where
Mhm.
my vulnerability comes from.
Yeah.
Um, but I don't think I would be as vulnerable as I am if I didn't have people in my life that kind of exemplified that.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, like my mother, she's the most sensitive person I know, but in the
Mhm.
best way possible.
Mhm.
She is very kind, caring. She loves so hard, but it's so easy for her to be hurt.
Mhm.
So I think in that way, I guess from seeing that, I get so afraid of being hurt that I kind of just reciprocate. I just wait until someone else does it because if I'm not the only one who can get hurt that way.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So I guess now that you've talked about where you would feel comfortable and uncomfortable being vulnerable, but how do you feel like your identity plays a role in that? Because I think my comfortability really changes based on the demographic
Mhm.
of my conversation.
Mhm.
So if I'm in a classroom with 90% white people and there's just 20 or 10% of minorities, in that space, I'm not going to feel comfortable being vulnerable. How do you feel like your identity plays a role?
Oh, I agree, and I think it's not this like premeditated. I'm not gonna be comfortable because there's solely white people in this classroom, but it's because of actual experiences that I've encountered where certain discussions like race and ethnicity would be brought up, and things have been said and remarks have been made that I either get offended by or I'm just taken aback by, you know? And so, and in most cases, I'm definitely the only person of color in my class. And to have it go from literally being the only black girl in this class discussing about race and discussing about women who are people of color, you know, and hearing what they have to say. And it's just, there's many times where I would love to say what I have experienced, but I think I just don't know how it's going to be taken. And so I get very, I take a step back, I think, because I don't want what I'm saying to be what they assume all women of color go through.
Absolutely.
Because each of us are different. We've each had different experiences. And I think I don't know how do you approach that? Like, how do you approach a professor who, or even a TA who might not be able to facilitate these discussions properly, which has happened multiple times. And when things are being said and remarks are being made, then when those aren't being addressed appropriately, that almost makes me shut down each time, which makes me obviously less vulnerable if I'm shutting down. And so in those times, and then when I see these students and even the TAs or professors kind of looking my direction, like expecting me to kind of say something based off of my own experience because I identify, it's just so interesting. And then and just also because somebody does not mean they also understand. So there's, I've also know a lot of women of color who don't understand a lot about the overall, like, what blackness is and what being a minority exactly means sometimes in a lot of cases, because where they were raised, or there's many factors that play into somebody's life to where just because somebody is doesn't mean they know, and so for that that expectation, even if it's not verbally being asked or said in class in these discussions, I think it's the body language and just that you can just feel it in the room that there is, and so and remarks being said, and it's just, I don't know, it's hard. I think it makes it a lot harder in those spaces, and
it does. Because you don't want to be a representative of an entire group of people.
Right.
You didn't ask for that, but people look at you like you are.
Right.
And I definitely am in the same boat. I've also experienced instances in class where, something comes up where, and it's not just, it doesn't just happen in ethnic studies and sociology classes.
No, definitely.
It happens everywhere. You could be taking a history class and, someone might a conversation might come up about, a lot of faulty things get said by students, especially.
Right.
And sometimes you can't help but say something to stand up for
what you believe
for yourself and what you believe in. If someone makes a remark, I remember in one of my classes, this girl made a comment about feeding the hungry people of Africa. And I was very angry, and I can't show my anger because we're kind of, we're in school, we're in a professional setting. I don't want to yell in class. It's not even like who I am. I don't want to just scream at people, but I'm so infuriated that there's someone in my classroom who really believes that everyone in Africa is hungry.
Exactly.
That's just insane to me. So, I said something, but the teacher, she, I think she was uncomfortable by the situation. She didn't correct anyone. She just allowed me to speak for myself. And at the end of the day, I don't feel comfortable having the pressure of, defending an entire continent.
Right.
That's ridiculous.
Right.
But I just wish that most of our school was educated on the things that I learn about in classes that not everyone is required to take.
Right.
So in spaces like that, I 100% agree with you. because of experiences like that, I don't currently feel comfortable to be vulnerable in front of people because I just don't know what people believe in. I always used to have this assumption that everyone kind of had the same education as me and believed the same things as me, but clearly there are people who have completely different views,
Right.
and I don't want to argue with them.
Right.
I'm in a space of learning. I'm not in a space where I don't want to be in a space where I have to defend who I am wherever I go.
And I don't even think it's always fair that it's almost always fallen upon
The student.
the students, students of color, to have to educate, and it's not. Like, I'm here to also learn, and I'm not here to educate you on my experiences and what it's been like to be a student of color or just a person of color in general in society,
Exactly.
And so for that expectation to almost be there and for the responses to almost be expected from from students of color, I think is unfair, and I don't think it's discussed enough in classes, and I don't, like we said, it's not always facilitated the best because these remarks are continuing to be said and nothing is done about them. But I think there's a lot of room for growth in, obviously, in higher ed, and I think it's about, I think it's just a lot about, how do you say it? I think it's for them to not be afraid to stand up to their own students almost, because I think I've seen TAs almost feel like they don't want to be the person to put the student in place, but let the people who would be affected by it almost,
Deal with it.
yeah, like, it's not like it's better for those students to just deal with that consequence than it would be to just call the other student out on it. So
Exactly.
I think that's very unfortunate because that's just a reality that we're always put into, is that we're the ones who are just gonna have to deal with it and move on and yeah, not complain about it and not talk about it, and then if things are brought up, then there's never much that's ever done about it, and so.
Yeah, I totally agree, and I wonder if I'm the only one who feels like this. Probably not, most likely not. But I wonder, do you ever feel kind of fear of consequence for bringing up these issues? If something happens in class, have you ever been kind of worried or uncomfortable or afraid for any reason, and what are those reasons,
Oh, yeah.
to talk to the teacher?
I think, I mean, we're a student at the end of the day, and I think my concerns are always about my grades and the results that I'm getting on my classwork and exams and even my participation or whatever it may be. And so I think I I'm very fearful that me addressing certain topics or instances that have happened comes off as if I'm trying to start some kind of like fight or something. Yeah, like I have bad intentions behind it or something, and then for the teacher to become very defensive, and then I am fearful for my grades, honestly, and I don't want that to reflect on my grade at the end of the day because I'm vocalizing what happened, and so that fear is definitely there that keeps me from speaking up in a lot of times. And again, like we said, if it's ever reported somehow or like brought up to, a different professor at the end, or like, the chair of the department, I think we're always told that it's not a big deal, and so it's as almost internalized, and then I think it's so just, the fear of the grades, but I think it's also the internalization of it's not that big of a deal, like I can move on, it's not that bad. But then I think, especially where I'm at today, is like there's a lot of like what happened, especially the first instance that I was facing this was first semester freshman year at CU, and I was livid. I remember going home to you and in the dorms and just ranting and just saying I cannot believe people can be this ignorant about something like this and not think students who are sitting there, like me, one of the two only people of color in that class, won't be affected by this, and for the TA to not approach it is also like another like slap in the face, like it's a second like form of disrespect, or like they just don't they don't value us as students almost, and so to have that level of hurt, but then you at that time too, because you're in a new environment, like I'm a freshman. Like, I don't know what my resources are, for one.
Yeah.
And two, like, I'm already scared to talk to, like, I don't even go to office hours to ask
Yeah.
questions about my quiz or to ask questions
Uh-huh.
about the homework, let alone bringing up something this
Not
sensitive
at the
and
time.
being very vulnerable in something like this when I know when they had a chance to speak on it in class, they
Mhm.
chose not to. So it almost feels like if I were to bring it up to them in person, that they wouldn't respond well to it. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so.
Mhm.
But so now, what I was saying, yeah, so now looking back on it, I feel like that makes me um, almost regretful just because if it's not for myself that I'm saying it's not that big of a deal for, I think it's going to
Mhm.
hurt the future generations and the future incoming classes of,
Mhm.
students of color or women of color who sit in class. And this is not something that happens once or twice, and it happens all the time. And for me to never say anything, I think is actually very unfortunate
Yeah.
for this incoming students.
That's I totally agree, and I just think it's so crazy to imagine. Why do we have to be the ones to accommodate
Mhm.
for someone else's lack of understanding?
Mhm.
Why are we the ones to have to get over it? Why are we the ones to have thick skin about everything?
Mhm.
Um, that definitely it does build more of a distrust, I guess, to um, people in positions of power.
Mhm.
Um, and I totally understand what you mean about, you're afraid for your grade.
Mhm.
Not to rhyme, but that's
Mhm.
honestly such a true statement. I feel like it's so difficult just from someone's exterior to kind of know what they believe in, what they stand for.
Mhm.
So in a classroom setting, when something is brought up about race, when a microaggression is made and no one speaks up about it,
Mhm.
if the teacher doesn't speak up about it, what does that say about their beliefs?
Mhm.
And if I speak up about it, does that mean that if they disagree, they could easily disagree with me because they didn't do anything to defend me
Mhm.
before I even had the opportunity to say anything? And once I do speak up for myself, they could at face value listen to what I have to say, incorporate it into class discussion, but what's happening behind the computer screen when they're putting
Mhm.
in grades?
Mhm.
You know, if they really disagree with what I say, um, and I don't assume the worst in people,
Right.
but it's a you never know type of
Right. And it's
situation.
always better to be safe.
Yeah, it's better
Yeah.
to be safe. Like that's my grade, and I feel like
Mhm.
so often because I try to defend my opinions, I'm dealing with the consequences,
Mhm.
and I don't think that's fair. Because the majority of the people at our predominantly white institution,
Mhm.
the majority of people who are defending their opinions, it's just an opinion about something that everyone has an opinion about,
Mhm.
and it's not objective. A lot of the things are not objective unless it's like something very clearly like that's wrong in politics or something.
Mhm.
Um, but if let's just be honest, if there's a white student arguing with their teacher about why they think one policy might be better than another for, let's just say for the economics of the United States,
Mhm.
right? That's you could say they could both bring up many different resources,
Mhm.
um, or different sources, and have their own opinions.
Mhm.
But when it comes to race, when it comes to identity, when it comes to
Mhm.
gender, when it
Mhm.
comes to oppression,
Mhm.
all of these issues, um, I think it should be objective, but it's not. And you can't see it based on looking at someone who is white. You can't see what they believe.
Mhm.
I think we are lucky enough to go to a school that's mostly liberal and we don't have to fear for our lives. We don't oftentimes we don't have to.
Mhm.
But you'd be surprised at the amount of encounters that students have
Oh yeah.
where they are scared for their
Oh
lives.
yeah.
The amount of racist encounters. I remember when I was a freshman, someone drew a swastika.
Mhm.
Someone drew a swastika on one of the hallway walls.
Yeah. It's disgusting.
That's so terrible. And
Yeah.
then the fact that there are people like that, but they're hiding behind a mask. They're hiding behind the mask of looking like everyone else.
Mhm.
And that's what makes me afraid. That's what,
exactly.
because I don't know who's wearing a mask and who isn't. Because nobody says to your face what they believe because they know they'll get in trouble.
Exactly.
But the actions that people can take, especially people in authority, if they happen to have an opinion that is hurtful, that's discriminatory, then that could easily affect me. So yes, sometimes I'm just gonna sit in silence when something is said that I should be defending.
Yeah.
It's so hard.
Yeah, and I think the point you bring up between, other controversial topics that people can easily argue about versus something like race and ethnicity, because it's so personal. It's somebody's identity, just like how somebody's sexuality and stuff might be, And so for something like that to be talked about comes in a deeper form. Like now you are like offending me on a different level, making and for somebody who, like I said, coming into freshman year was a brand new environment for me. I was never one of the few people of color in the room or on a campus, let alone or in the city, and so everywhere I was going, it was always just brought to my awareness, let alone noticing other people notice me in certain environments, and so I think when stuff like that is attacked, it hurts on a different level versus like arguing about the economy. Like you said, I think that can be you can move on, and it's not so deeply rooted. Our history and our identity is just so closely tied with it that you're attacking me on a personal level. Like that's like what was said in my class freshman year was made me sit there and question, do I deserve sitting here? Because the student was going on and on about affirmative action, and they were basically saying that's the only reason why students of color in universities and we're taking spots that belong to white kids. And I was like, wow, so me working that hard every night my entire high school career, maintaining a high GPA and getting great ACT scores don't mean anything.
Exactly.
Like that, now all of that is just being minimized. Like that's not you're looking at me from just a physical appearance. Yes, I'm this clear-cut, dark-skinned African-American woman, and now for you to really think the reason why I'm sitting here in class with you is because of my skin, and it's not because of my hard work, and it's not because I deserve to be here, and you can't. It's not. Yes, I'm gonna go home, and a part of me is really gonna sit there and think, is that true? Like if it's gonna make you question
to that
level. Like, and for people to, and for me to stand up and say, it's not that big of a deal, I'll move on. Like, that's the levels we're expected to go constantly, and that's so unacceptable.
Exactly.
Like, that's not okay. And for, these young 18-year-old students to be coming in and, experiencing college in its own is so stressful. Like, you're living on your own for the first time. Like, a lot of the daily life activities that you're independent for and you're responsible for yourself, you're barely learning. You're learning how you best operate and how when you should go get a meal or when you shouldn't, and the smallest things. And now you're sitting in the back thinking, so that student said that. Now I'm sitting in the dining hall. Does the student across from me also think that? And then you're like, sending a line. Yeah, and you're like, so does this person who's serving me this bowl of whatever, rice or the burrito, whatever, like, does this person also think that? Like, and now all of a sudden, that's all my thoughts is, does everybody here really think the only reason why I'm here is because of my skin?
Exactly.
And so that really consumes you, and then that starts to distract you. And it just leads to this negative cycle.
It does. It's a snowball effect.
Yeah, and it just keeps hurting you. It's all it is. It just keeps hurting us.
It really does. And it's as disheartening as it is that we always end up having to just deal with it. We do. We can't just allow ourselves to feel these emotions and not do anything about it. We can't allow it to consume us or build on top of the other thoughts that we also have. we also deal with things that everyone else deals
Exactly.
with. You know, like
Exactly.
people deal with anxiety and mental illness. People deal with family issues. People deal with relationship issues.
Financial
People have
issues. There's
yeah,
so many
people have
things.
disabilities. Like
Mhm.
we deal with all of these things that everyone deals with, and then there's just that sprinkle of
Additional.
discrimination
Exactly.
that you have to deal with, and that's just like the cherry on top of the disgusting sundae, to be honest.
Yeah.
I don't know how else to explain it. But I think that also brings up a point of, we are also women,
Right.
and we, are even kind of, a lot of people tend to say, at the very bottom of the barrel when it comes to feeling oppression.
Mhm.
I think especially people who are queer deal with it the most.
Mhm.
And I think that we're also dealing with a lot of oppression within our own community.
Oh, exactly.
There's a lot of sexism in the community, and we're so used to having to stand by
Mhm.
everyone else and defend our race that
Mhm.
we're kind of neglecting taking care of our feminine identity.
Exactly.
We neglect taking care of ourselves as women and trying to be equal to men, not
Mhm.
just to people who are white.
Mhm.
And there's just a combination of things that intersect, and we don't always have the opportunity to analyze it and to take care of ourselves. Um, but I kind of want to just wrap this up
Mhm.
by kind of talking about what are some things that you do or you think people should do to take care of themselves, because there is not, and we're not going to come up with an answer or a solution
Right.
to discrimination.
Right. If only it was that easy.
Exactly. I'm
Yeah.
sure if we could, figure it out in this conversation during our car talk, someone else would have figured it out before us.
Yeah.
But I want to know, as an individual, how do you take care of yourself?
Yeah, I think my experiences have led me to become more vocal, whether even if it wasn't completely approaching um, professors or TAs or other students in the classroom. I think it's just vocalizing my thoughts on certain subjects and um, almost, yes, almost approaching the student, even if
Mhm.
I'm not calling their name out. Like,
Mhm.
I will purposely sit there and wait till a few other students participate and then say my 2 cents.
Yeah.
So it kind of addresses him, or them. I don't know what their gender is, but addresses them in a way that
Mhm.
doesn't come off as attacking, because that's I
Mhm.
don't want people to I don't want to feel like I'm being attacked. So I actually take the extra step to make sure others don't feel attacked.
Yeah.
And so um I'll just bring up a few things, and I think also um, one of the most, the best thing that I've done for myself, I guess I could say, is I've learned how to say no,
Mhm.
both to myself and others. I
Okay.
think it's one thing to learn how to say no to other people, and when you need to do self-care,
Mhm.
and when you know you've reached your limit and you um, just need time to just be in your room alone and just re-energize,
Yeah.
and take care of your own
Mhm.
selfish needs. Be selfish. It's okay to
Exactly.
be selfish sometimes, and I think even telling myself no and redirecting what my own goals are at the end of the day and when I need to cut off and what I can continue doing
Mhm.
has helped me tremendously, and um, I've seen my time management stuff get better by doing stuff like that. So I think
Yeah.
it's hard to do at first, because I think it's very easy to fall into, dang,
Mhm.
I want to be able to do X, Y, and Z.
Yeah.
But my main goal is something totally different, that sacrificing X, Y, and Z is gonna be
Exactly.
okay. Like, and then coming to terms with that stuff being okay, and then seeing the results of um, not being as tired or not
Yeah.
being as overwhelmed and stuff make that
Absolutely.
difference, and then it just becomes easier to keep continuing that.
Yeah. I totally agree with you. I think in addition to that,
Mm-hmm.
I really heavily rely on my religious beliefs.
Mm-hmm.
I think my faith allows me to kind of place all of the burdens that I feel, all of the emotions that I feel, and to kind of just give it to someone else.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel a different kind of peace when it comes to that. And I also kind of have this idea of greater purpose and greater outcome. So I think that all of these negative things will, um, these are experiences that I need to experience. As unfortunate as it is that it's not exactly equitable the way that burdens are distributed between people. But I think we all deal with our own issues, and my faith really helps me to believe that that's going to help me somehow one day to help other people. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, I'm able to kind of, I guess, re-energize. Um, it's kind of what pushes me to make a difference in one way or another. It's kind of what keeps me positive and believing that I can do something good for this world because I see how ugly it is sometimes.
Right.
But yeah, that's kind of the only way. That's kind of the best way for me. Some people might see it as kind of putting off your own burdens and just kind of ignoring it, but I don't think it is.
Yeah,
I really
I
do
don't think
feel
so.
a sort of peace with being able to give it to God.
Mm.
But yeah, do you have any other thoughts before we wrap up?
No, but I think this was a great reflective
It really has.
talk. We always do this in the car, which I think
We
is
do.
honestly so necessary.
We
This is
absolutely
actually
do.
therapeutic.
It
I
is.
think that's what it
And
is.
to talk, just a side note for those of you who are listening, Reatea and I, the reason why I made this segment called Car Talk, is because we always, every time we hang out, every time we go somewhere, we sit and talk in the car real quick
Yeah.
before we go home. And it never ends up being a quick
Real quick,
conversation.
yeah.
We talk for
Hours.
hours
Yeah.
about things like this, sometimes, on a deeper level, a more personal level. But we kind of just wanted to do something that was more natural to us, like sitting in a car and talking, and that's what we're doing today.
Yeah.
So, Reatea, thank you for being able to join me in this
Yes.
first episode
Thank you
of
for
Car Talks.
having me.
Absolutely, and thank you for listening, and have a great day.
Y'all haters corny with that Illuminati mess. Paparazzi catch my fly and my cocky fresh. I'm so reckless when I rock my Givenchy dress. I'm so possessive, so I rock his rock necklaces. My daddy Alabama, mama Louisiana. You mix that Negro with that Creole, make a Texas Bama. I like my baby hair with baby hair and afro. I like my Negro nose with Jackson 5 nostrils. I earned all this money, but they never take the country out me. I got hot sauce in my bag, Okay, ladies, now let's get information. I say, okay, ladies, now let's get information. I say, prove to me you got some coordination. I say, okay, ladies, now let's get information. I say.